Hello. Thank you for joining us for the season finale of Unspoken Conversations with Candace. Season 3 was dedicated to male survivors of sexual abuse. My name is Neil Parek, and that's Candace Sanchez next to me on the screen. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and my website. We're also live on Candace's Facebook and YouTube accounts as well. If you're joining us, please let us know where you're watching from. This is a live show, so we're looking forward to putting your comments on the screen. And if you're watching at the very beginning, thank you for watching. If you're watching the replay, thank you for making the time to do that. It means a lot to us. I will, off the bat, Candace, say that I am uh, a little nervous and a little, I have all the feels, all the emotions. It's been a year. We've, had a number of guests. We've learned a lot, and this is the capstone. This is we're bringing season 3 to a close. Wow.
I I feel, Neil, like this whole year has been like a master class for both of us. I think it's been a master class for just healing in general. I just want to let everybody know that the conversations that we've had on my podcast, for all seasons and really primarily season 3, we really made a lot of focus on giving the males a voice. And Neil and just how we connected, I always tell people that I meet, I believe in divine design, that people are meant to cross your path for a reason. And when our paths crossed, he had a call of action, and I was just too excited and too honored, and just it was at the right time. And so just Neil, this journey that we've been on, for my season 3, dedicated male survivors, unspoken conversation with Candace, has been seriously a masterclass for healing for both myself. I mean, when I think about even the healing I've received with every episode, every guest, right? I mean, we talk about trigger warnings. There were triggers that happened on every conversation that I know, listening to the guests. And then even when I replayed the episodes and re listened to the recordings, something always sparked within me. And so I have healed even more so. And I just owe a gratitude to Jeff Chugum for sponsoring my podcast and helping with my production costs. I just want to thank Digimentors for allowing Neil to be my co-host, and for pro bono doing all the video production, which is something new that I did for this season. So just really want to do a shout out to Digimentors. Thank you, Neil, Jeff Chugum, and then last but not least, Jesse Daso. I mean, he helped to kind of get the word out there and to obtain guests, to get people on the show and just spreading the word. So I just want to thank everybody for tuning in, for joining us on this journey. And I'm just excited, Neil, just so excited to really do a whole reflection of, look at every guest, talk about every guest, talk about what we learned, discuss some of the themes. And I'm just really excited to kind of do a deep dive into that.
Absolutely. I think that, more than anything else, I want to celebrate the work that we did, and really, give a chance to uh, put out our thank yous, to reflect, to really highlight the guests, as you mentioned. But we also want to thank all the people who have watched over the course of the year. And I want to put out, there are a couple of comments that have come in already, since this is a live show. The first one I want to put out is actually a former colleague of mine, Yasna Stannard, listening from Connecticut, and saying thanks. Happy to see we're doing well. Yasna, thank you very much. If I remember correctly, and this is always challenging if you get it wrong, but I believe Yasna worked at United Way many years ago, potentially as an intern, if I'm not mistaken. I remember she was very early in her career. She's gone on to do some incredible things, and Yasna I've been watching on LinkedIn. So congratulations to all the work that you've done. This next comment is from someone we both know very well. Dawn Helmerick is watching from Milwaukee. And she says, these are two of my favorite people on the planet. Dawn, you brought us. I'll get the heart as well.
Yeah.
You brought us together. You introduced me to Candace, and you've been my inspiration for sharing my story about being abused when I was a child, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Candace and I will both, give a little bit of context, share our own experience. But Dawn, thank you for all the support you've given and the inspiration you've been for so long. One of our former guests is watching, and I wasn't sure if he'd watch it live, but James Turner is watching from the UK. And if I'm doing my math correctly, 7 plus like six, it's like 1 in the morning out there. James, thank you so much for watching. That really means a lot. And we'll talk about your episode in a little bit, um, and share some of the thoughts we had. And I'll just remind people to let us know where you're watching from. Put it in the comments um, on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and we can put it on the screen. Um, if you're watching on Facebook, make sure you press play on the video, because if you're watching in your feed and you just happen to come across it, if someone shared it or if you're looking on our page, if you put in a comment, we won't be able to see it. You have to actually press play on the video uh, to do that. So we hopefully will do that, and we'll put this ticker on the bottom. I'm really proud to say, and James is saying it's midnight in UK, so it's not that late. Okay, not quite 1 o'clock. It means a lot to me that our alumni group on Facebook, Wesleyan University, where I went to school, graduated, very proud alum. My wife Pam also went to Wesleyan. The social media team at Wesleyan has supported this work as well, in terms of liking and sharing posts, and the fact that they're watching live means a lot. So thank you, whoever is managing the account. Really appreciate that. Um, it I think that we have we've done some good work,
We've
Candace. We've
done
done
some
some
great
good work.
work, Neil. This it's important work. The work that we've done is great. And I know we'll talk about, I think it was Kenneth, one of our guests, that told us both, right, when we were doing the first season and the episodes, and then producing them and putting them out there. And I remember he said, like, it's we're putting great content out there, and people will watch it when they need to watch it. They will find it when they need to find it. And I think for you and I, that has stuck with both of us
Yeah,
throughout this journey, to just remind us, because I mean, you and I are very similar. I think we've discussed this a lot this year. Is we talked about like imposter syndrome and being perfectionists, and never wanting to fail at things, and overanalyzing. And I think you and I both understand that, but then how that brings anxiety to us, and how that has an impact on our mental well-being. And you and I have really helped to coach and lean on each other throughout this
yeah,
journey, and to give each other grace, and to just know, like I said, the work that we're doing, this is important work. And it the people that need it will find it when they're meant to listen. And so I really, that Kenneth really set that tone, I think, as a constant reminder throughout all of our episodes and throughout this past year. And I cannot believe that it's been a year. I can't, we're here.
well,
Like, we're here.
it's been a year. We started off working together actually much longer ago, right?
The
We
Yeah,
were working together
April of tw- 20,
21, I think it is,
yes, it
right?
was. It
It's
absolutely was.
and
It
so for
absolutely
folks
was.
who are joining us late, just as a reminder, this is the season 3 finale of Unspoken Conversations with Candace. Season 3 was dedicated to male survivors of sexual abuse. Um, Before we talk about our guests, and I put that slide up that's showing Kenneth and our other guests. Um, I want to take a step back and let give people a little bit of an understanding of how we came together, what kind of brought us. Divine design, as you've referred to it over the course of the year. In April of 21, our friend Dawn asked me to speak on a panel of male survivors of sexual abuse. Um, this was out of Milwaukee, and I said, "Are you sure you want me? I'm not from Milwaukee." She said, "You've been there, right?" It didn't matter in this day and age. Everything on Zoom and live streaming like this, it's all good. Um, and so I shared my story there. We'll talk about each of our stories as well. But at the end, I made a plea for to the people in the audience. And I think the fun part about that, Candace, is that you weren't planning on being there that day, right?
That's correct. So, like we mentioned, 2021, that was the year. Prior to that was COVID 2020, right? So I launched my book in November of 2020. So I'm celebrating my 3-year book
Hmm.
launch. And then 6 months later, the podcast had dropped, right? So looking at June of 2021, but I had gone to that panel and my work, a work meeting, because by day I'm a healthcare IT professional. So I work in the corporate sector for a healthcare organization. And my meeting got canceled, and it was like a kind of a last minute cancellation, and I right away immediately knew there was this the I think it was the city of Milwaukee was having the office, protection, and there was a panel. I knew it was gonna be so specific to male survivors, and I really wanted to support Dawn, support Team Teal 365, Samantha Collier, and so they had been looping me into email, so I was able to join. And I might have joined a little bit late, Neil, but I remember you talking and speaking, and then that call of action where you specifically asked the women on the call what we could do. And I immediately, because, I'm doing, my book launch, I'm doing the podcast launch, and I really was wondering if I was going to continue, because sometimes people don't want to tell their stories, or they're still afraid to tell their stories, or they're living in shame. And you had this call of action. I thought this would be perfect. I can do a whole season and dedicate it. And I remember writing that in the chat on that Zoom call. And I immediately sent you an email, and I'm like, I'm all in. What do we need to do to make this happen? And here we are. I mean, the rest is
Yeah,
history.
it was pretty incredible, and just to give people a sense of context of that call of action. um, I was inspired by my colleague Sri Srinivasan, who's the CEO of Digimentors. He has long opposed serving on manels, what he calls conference panels where they're only men. So if someone puts them on a panel and they're only men, he'll decline the invitation and say either find someone else, add a woman to the panel, or you know uh, give my spot to a woman. And what I did is I turned that on its head, with the idea being within this space of advocacy around sexual abuse and survivors. Most of the focus is on women. It's mostly women who are front and center and speaking and sharing their story. And when people think of survivors, think of sexual assault, usually they think of a woman. So I asked everyone watching, for all the women in the house, to please make space for men. Please include us in your panels, invite us to speak, that we might need some help, we might need some hand holding. Um, but it was a just, please, we need the support. And Candace stepped up and really dedicated. She was texting me during the meeting, emailing me in the chat. We agreed to talk later, but she said, "I'm going to dedicate my whole season." Now you have to understand, Candace has been doing this podcast or at that time, had for 2 years.
Jeez.
She was in the middle of her second season as an audio podcast. So she was giving up. She asked, "Would you be my first guest?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'll be your first guest, but let's. There might be more we can do." And I talked her into doing these as live stream productions, and I served as co-host for the year. And I can tell you, Candace, I learned so much over the course of this year. Um, really briefly, for folks who don't know, and this is part of the repetition and getting the habit and being comfortable saying these words. I was 7 years old when I was abused by a neighbor. He came We had just moved in. He came and knocked on my door and said he needed help with a Cub Scout project. And I said, sure, what can I do to help? And we were in a downstairs room, my dad's office at home. And it, it wasn't a Cub Scout project, I'll tell you that. He uh, was, touching me where he shouldn't have, been doing things, and I didn't know anything. I didn't know what was happening, frankly. I didn't make anything of it. And it wasn't until my parents came home, they noticed that I'd left the light on in that office. Um, and I asked, why were you in the office? Oh, well, so and so came over. And what were you doing? Well, we did this and this and this. I could have been talking about playing with Legos or Matchbox cars, but I was describing, you know, um, the abuse. And we went right away to the neighbor's door, and my dad was, explaining to his father. His father yelled at him. I mean, it all kind of went from there. But um, certainly is something that I never didn't know about it. I didn't never forgot or suppressed it, but I think that I never knew the impact that it had on my life, and how it had played out, how it had affected me emotionally, and how the trauma stayed with me. And I shared my story once in a public forum, in a production that I do Sunday mornings called the New York Times Read Along. It felt like a safe space because it was mostly a regular audience. That was several years ago. And then it wasn't until you and I started working together and planning this season last January. I put out a blog post explaining my story, and then we had our first episode, and then it just went from there. Um, Candace, I'd like you to ask you about your story as well, for folks who might be watching who didn't watch over the course of the year. Can you share a little bit about what happened to you?
Yeah, so, so my book, I'll just put a plug here for the book. So my book is called Unspoken. Um, and because I wasn't supposed to tell, I mean, it's one word, one powerful word, I believe. I was abused by two family members, an uncle and a stepfather, between the ages of 5 to 15. So when you think about how young I was, it started, in at my grandmother's house in the infamous TV room is what I call it. And it just really started with, more of sitting on laps and, all the things that they do to manipulate, to grope you, to, just make you feel comfortable and make you feel like you're not doing anything wrong, and just to sit there and be quiet. So I just remember, inappropriate touching, and that happened, as whenever my uncle was at my grandmother's house. And then it shifted, so then that kind of stopped because I got smart, being at my grandmother's house, and I just knew not to go in the TV room. I just kind of would stay close to my mom, and just try to not be alone with that uncle, and always had an uneasy feeling being around that uncle. And then, when I was 11, it started then with my stepfather. And unfortunately, it started on Father's Day, which, believe it or not, it started with just some innocent kiss. That kiss turned into something that wasn't a kiss. And so from there, it just kind of kept happening. But I believe, again, even with my stepfather, he was manipulating me, trying to see what he could get away with. There was exposure to, body parts, just peeping in on the shower when I would take a shower. And so there was just things that were occurring that, again, he was, just trying to see what I probably would or wouldn't tell. And I never told anybody. And it has affected me my whole life. I mean, honestly, it's affected me with relationships, how I respond, to relationships, how I receive or don't receive love. It's affected my children. It has had a long time effect on me, but thank God, that I entered healthcare, in the workforce when I was 19. I think healthcare saved my life. Getting in a career in healthcare, I had benefits. I had access to healthcare, and I was able to go get the mental health services that I needed to really unpack all my trauma. And so I advocate for, any of us that are suffering in silence to really go get the services that you need. There are so many organizations out there that are willing to help. you heal from your trauma, from your past. And so the book was launched November of 2020. And I remember I published it in 2020 for, I had been working on the book. It took me 3 years to write the book. And 3 years, seems like a long time. And it was, because I kept reliving that trauma. I kept peeling that band aid off my wound over and over again. And I went into many bouts of depression, just fighting with myself, still living in the shame and the fear and the guilt. And then just finally in 2020, when COVID hit, I was afraid I would die of COVID and never tell my story. And
Mhm.
that was the push that I needed. And
Mhm.
then during those 3 years, my daughter planted a seed about a podcast and bought all this equipment. And I'm like, well, then now what am I going to do? Old Unspoken Conversations with Candace was born. And I'm just so, like, humbled, honored that I'm doing this important work, and truly, truly, like I said, with every episode, every conversation, that we've had, with every guest, I keep healing, and I am just so grateful to be able to be surrounded by this amazing network support of these survivors, thrivers, because we get up every day to face life, and it's not easy, and we still go through our stuff, but at least we don't go through it alone. We know that we are worthy. We know that we are loved. We know that we are seen. We know that we are believed, and we are stronger together, and we are louder than silence. And so I'm just grateful to be here and that I survived that trauma, and I'm here to
Absolutely.
speak about it.
Absolutely. And that's an important thing, the idea of going from surviving to thriving.
Mhm.
It's really, and to go, we'll talk about some of the uh, takeaways, some of the lessons that we've learned from our guest. Why don't we go ahead and do that? And we could start with it, what I think is an interesting, not just a great story, but just in terms of the way it fits into this conversation. Scott Kinderman is listed as both January and November.
Mhm.
He served as a bridge effectively. You had your audio podcast. You had a interview with him in January before we launched the video series,
Mhm.
um, and then we got to interview him on video in November. So we actually got
Mhm.
to talk about his kind of his journey, even just in this year as we've
Mhm.
been working together. What are some of the things that stand out from our conversation with Scott?
Well, when I think about Scott and his journey, just complete transformation from zero to, from January to now, to last month, to November. The funny thing is I pre-record a lot of my prior seasons. Season 1,
Mhm.
season 2 was always pre-recorded, and I would just
Sure.
only drop the audio. Scott and I, which is really, like, again, divine design, we had recorded before your call of action, Neil, which was, like, just in time. And Scott
Yeah.
and I kinda talked about, like, he was, like, kinda like the first male, so to speak, to really publicly come out. And then that was the first time he really spoke his truth, and his daughter sitting right there with him in my studio, and we were having this, like, powerful healing conversation. And Scott was very shaky and trembly with his story, and he had things written out because I needed him to kind of be very, with his timeline, and kind of be specific of, like, what he experienced and when it was and with who, and then the things that he encountered. And that was the first time his daughter was hearing it, and that was the episode you heard in January. So he really
Yeah.
was like kind of the kickoff of that voice, right, where you hear, but then how he's transformed from then to now, and the leaps and bounds that he's made. He's truly healed, I think, from the inside out, and it shows. He's doing amazing work in the advocacy phase, in the advocacy world, and then he's also doing more of the political realm. Like, he's really getting involved, created a support group for Nami and Racine, just being a co-facilitator. Just, I'm so, so proud of Scott. And he was my unspoken hero at the walk this past year, the Walk Together Milwaukee that I bring, which we'll talk, with when we talk about Lori and Kathy for
Sure.
August and September. But just wanted, again, Scott, it's just the transformation, right? Transformation. And I think going from the victim to survivor to thriver. And, Scott he's an advocate at Believe Survivors. And that's where I met his daughter. And so, again, I believe in divine design. I did an event with Belief, and that's how I got partnered with Scarlett, got partnered with Scott. And the rest is history. And that partnership then led Scott and I both to be board members of Believe Survivors Incorporated. And as we are doing this episode live, Belief Survivors is having the board meeting, so I had to excuse myself
Oh
from the board
wow,
meeting to do this amazing episode, which they all understood and were very supportive
that's
of the podcast. So
that's great.
again, just the way things all happen, right? Divine design is what I keep talking about.
And you can learn more about Belief Survivors at beliefsurvivors.org. Um, I think for me, what stood out for our conversation with Scott was really just how, and our other guests as well, but Scott in particular, um, this desire to help, this desire to, he's gone on this journey and he's you know he's come to some peace with aspects of his story, etc. I know when we talked, when we interviewed him, when you and I interviewed him, that's one of the things that he, even afterward, he's still emailing me and encouraging me, look at this resource, look at that resource, not pushing it, but just in case it would help. I mean, if anyone is paying it forward, Scott definitely is. So I want to give him a shout out for that. Before we talk about Kenneth again, I want to bring in a few comments. Rose Horowitz, who's a colleague of mine, she does a great. She's done a great series of work, including social media posts and a podcast. She did a live stream as well, and she's done a lot of Twitter Spaces around women to follow. Uh, Again, that idea of making sure that we're encouraging people to listen to women in other spaces. In this space, we're trying to make sure we encourage men, encourage people to listen to male survivors. But Rose says, "Kudos for this important series. She was honored to hear my story as I was readying to share it publicly." So this is several years ago. This was, if you remember, the Brett Kavanaugh hearings triggered a lot of
Mhm.
people, and
Mm.
for that Sunday show, before I shared my story, I called, among others, Rose and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this tomorrow. I'm going to talk a little bit about the news coverage, but then I'm going to set the paper aside." And I was in Hastings. I was in my home, my the home where I grew up, where the abuse took place. And I said, "I'm going to share my story." And she was one of the people that really helped me feel comfortable doing that. So, Rose, thank you for that. Paula Kiger is watching as well, also saying very important work. She's driving, so she can't really stay with us, but that's perfectly fine. Paula is another colleague from Digimentors, and she's been a rock of support throughout, several years when I've been, uh, worked up about various, feeling like I wasn't doing enough. She's been that voice that to help walk me back. So I want to thank her for that. Um, the next person who we have a comment from is a mutual friend that you introduced me to. Kate is watching. She's so grateful to all of you and Dawn for sharing our journey from survivors to thrivers. Your journey is more impactful than you know. And when I came out to Milwaukee back in April, you put me in touch with. I think you put me in touch with Kate, right? Or was it Dawn?
Dawn, Dawn.
Dawn did.
So she
Uh,
kinda, like, helped host you that first
she
night, and
hosted
then
me
I
that one
hosted you the
night, and
second
I
night.
stayed with
Mhm.
you the second night. And
Yep.
but it just, what an incredible group to be a part of and to be connected with. Um, so let's go ahead. The next guest that we had in the show was Kenneth. We made reference to him earlier. Um, and just in case folks missed it, what I take away from our conversation with Kenneth actually didn't happen in the interview
Right.
that we did with him. Um, as Candace mentioned, we pre-recorded our interviews, and once the interview aired, and the reason we did that, I'll just explain technically. I was explaining to a colleague of mine yesterday, because Candace had a podcast. We wanted to put the audio first. We wanted to make sure that the audio still had um, um, the focus. And so what we would do is we'd pre-record these conversations. I would send her the audio files, let her launch the podcast, and then later we'd launch the video as a recorded video, so that I didn't want to trump the podcast, step on her toes. So we were watching the recorded video with Kenneth, We had it on our screens. We were on a conference call, and I shared, something that I'd felt very strongly about, and I struggled with almost all year. I think you may have asked how are everyone doing okay, and I'm like, you know what, I'm not. I'm not doing okay. I didn't do enough to promote the show. I didn't do enough to tell people about it. I did a lot for the first episode, and we had a huge. That was my episode, and I wrote a blog post and huge response on social media. And I felt like I had let Kenneth down. I felt I let you down, Candace. Um, and it was Kenneth that said, "Neil, stop.
He
take,
said, "You're
take,
putting good content in the world, out there in the
yeah,
world to share."
yeah,
And that is the most important thing. This work that we're doing, he's doing it, you're doing it,
yeah,
I'm doing it, we're doing it together. He said, "It shouldn't matter how many people are watching or people are commenting. That's what we want, yes. But what you need to understand is the fact that they'll watch it when they need to watch it. They'll find it when they need to find it."
yeah,
And those words, Neil, and now let me just let everybody know, Neil is he's a perfectionist, and I
yeah,
respect him wholeheartedly for it, but it was like I didn't want this he was putting so much pressure, I think, on himself, and Neil, and you didn't need to, but I appreciated the fact that you were vulnerable enough to say that, and I wasn't feeling that way. Kenneth was You were feeling that way. But honestly, Kenneth's words, those words has helped us because
yeah.
anytime either one of us were feeling a certain way about the next episode, about the launch that was happening, are people watching? And I see all the statistics in my where the platform lives, right? Where all the
Yeah.
podcast statistics and people are. And I'm almost up to 5,000 downloads. And this
Wow.
season has had a lot of traction.
Wow.
So I believe that's exactly what Kenneth said. And that is true. People will listen when they need to listen. They'll find it when they need to find it. We're putting good content, and that's all we need to worry about.
Yeah.
And with
That
those
was
graces, that's what we needed to hear at that moment. We really did.
at, at that moment and several moments throughout the year, as you said, we
As
kept
I'm still saying
repeating
it.
that, still saying it. And as folks will know, I mean, I did more promotion for this episode as the season finale, the finale for season 3. Candace will continue with the podcast afterward,
Mhm.
but it's something that's really hard when you're in this space, when you're putting out content. It's hard not to focus on, is it resonating, are people engaging with it, are people watching. And Kenneth's reality check was just really uh just so meaningful, so important. um More reality for us. One of our biggest supporters, one of our most consistent viewers, um my mom, watching from Tampa, not Hastings. She's in Tampa for the winter till about March. But my mom is watching, and she says, both of you are doing very important work. I'm proud of you. Uh, Thank you, Mom. Thank you for that, and thank you for watching every month without fail. And whether it was recorded, pre-recorded, or live, she was always watching and putting in comments. And it certainly means a lot. It
It does.
means a lot.
Thank you, mom. Thank you, mom.
Um, our
One
next,
other
yeah,
real quick before we move on to
sure,
Nathan is there's just one book that I want to plug for Kenneth that
yeah, sure,
something for me was his book that he has called How to Save Your Inner Wonder Woman, a guide to help caregivers and allies of survivors of childhood sexual abuse using Wonder Woman. And so I read that book and I just love what I learned. Just from the caregiver, the ally side of it, because I think for so long, I mean, I knew my trauma. I was dealing with my trauma, but to understand maybe the people that I was in relationships with, how they had to maybe deal with some of the things that was happening. And I really wanted that lens, right, to understand that. And so someone had asked me recently, "Hey, Candace, I'm dating someone that's been abused as a child. Do you have any books to recommend?" And Kenneth's book was the one that I recommended. And so I just wanted to make sure I kind of noted that it's so important that if, you're a survivor, people caregivers, allies. This book is such a great book, and so I just wanted to make sure I plugged that book because it did help me. So I just wanted to plug
Absolutely.
that for Kenneth.
Absolutely. Let's and take a moment. We'll pull it up on the screen as well, just to show folks. There we go. There's his website. And what was the book again? You mentioned it was Wonder Woman, right?
Yeah, it was How to Save Your Inner Wonder Woman. It's a guide to help caregivers and allies of survivors of childhood sexual abuse using
There we
Wonder
go.
Woman.
There we go.
And it's a really
Whoops.
great
Oh, that's a
book.
sorry about that. This is a live show, so you never know what's gonna happen. I'm trying to find the book here. Um, those are interviews. Let's see.
I can send the link for
Yeah, if you,
Amazon.
yeah, it's not coming up on his website right away. There we go. How to Save Your Inner
There we go.
Wonder Woman.
Mhm.
That's
There it
it
is.
right here. So if
Mhm.
you're interested, Kenneth's website is lostimaginations.com, and you can find it on his website. And I'll put that as a ticker as well, lostimaginations.com. And you were saying that you shared this with someone who was in a
Just
relationship,
recently.
right?
In a relationship with someone that has dealt with sexual child abuse, and so she's like, "Candace, do you have any books?" And so I said, "I do," and I mentioned this one, and so she's like, "Oh my goodness, thank you for referring that." So I believe she bought it off Amazon, and, uh, and like I said, this is the beauty of collaboration, partnership, working together with other survivors and understanding the work that they're doing. And Kenneth has many books, and I believe I bought pretty much all of his books, so I have a whole library, and I give them out to people that ask for them. If they need something, I probably have something for you. So,
That's
and with
good.
my life coaching business, that's helped as well.
Sure, sure. So then let's go ahead. The next guest that we had back in March was Nathan Spiteri.
Hmm.
Um, and for me, I'll say that up to that point, I mean, it was me and then Kenneth. Nathan came on, and I have to admit, I was a little bit intimidated by Nathan because he is. I mean, he's a personality. He's an actor. He's been in various productions. And if you look at his website, which we'll show in a second, um, he's quite the guy. And been in he's been on TV. He did a TED talk. Um, but more than anything else, in the from the conversation that we had with him, what I took away was just this idea of forgiveness. Um, and I asked him point blank in the middle of that conversation, is he able to forgive his abuser? And really, that's I think what started off a series of conversations with our other guests around the role of forgiveness. Um, and he really impressed upon me the importance of doing that for your own sake, not
Hmm.
for it's not something you're giving to your abuser. It's something that you're giving to yourself. What stood out for you for Nathan?
I think so. Nathan's episode. So I we record and then I listen to them, and I remember um, when he talked about, like, the pool and swimming, it triggered a memory for me that I kind of had forgotten. And not that I wanna go into much graphic detail, but I that happened in the pool for me as well
Yeah.
with my abuser. And so it was just, and then it was the where and how it could happen when there was family around, and so it triggered. And I'm not saying like I suppress the memory, but it's when you have these conversations and they say something, it does. And I remember feeling a certain way. Neil, throughout this journey, I've had dreams. I hate to say it, called nightmares. I'd wake up in sweats because the trauma was kind of resurfacing. And so, that was something that triggered me with Nathan's episode. And the other thing too is I just want to give Nathan kudos. He's really branched out on TikTok. I've seen his TikTok videos. He's talking about it publicly on TikToks. And the power of TikTok, he's trying to spread the message and
Hmm.
reach the audience, the younger audience, to kind of educate and empower them, and tell them, like, don't let this happen to you. Prevention is key. So he's really, taking charge on the TikTok, and I've started to follow him, and I just again, I'm just so proud of all of us and how we just continue to branch ourselves and use the power of our voice. And so for
Sure.
that, Nathan, I really appreciated Nathan's honesty, and he was so very raw and real, just like
Yeah,
straight to the point,
he
and
was.
just it just hit you like a lightning bolt.
He was. Um, our April guest was Callan Hardy. Now you just met with Callan, right?
I I saw Callan yesterday. I drove.
Yesterday.
Yes, we had lunch. I drove to Madison. We had a great meeting. I am just so honored. You know, Callan gave me 2 of his books, and in his book, he wrote me the best notes that he could have written as far as, like, he's found a new friend and, to we're friends. And, when you get older in life, you usually have your friends, but to get a new friend. And, we talked about when he attended Hope Shining Blue, and it was such a great conversation. And, Callan is passing the torch to me to bring back a conference that it was near and dear to his heart. He had a male survivor conference, but I asked him if, and he inspired me on that podcast when he talked about his conference and the purpose of the conference and what he achieved with the conference. And, it stopped, I believe it was before COVID with funding and whatnot. And I asked him humbly, I said, would you mind passing the torch? Would you mind allowing me to now recreate the conference with men and women and do a survivor retreat? And so that's what we talked about yesterday. We had a brainstorming session day. We took notes. We have a plan. We have an outline. We have agendas. So I'm just so honored to announce that we will be having a path to healing. We're going to bring the conference back with for men and women, for allies, for professionals. We're going to have different tracks, and I cannot wait. And it's going to take all of 2024 to plan it, and our goal is to have it in June of 2025. So
Which
more
is
to
great.
come. Yes.
And I'm looking forward to supporting that work as best I can,
Yes.
and hopefully being out there as well.
Yes.
Um, James Turner was our guest in May, and before we talk about what struck us about that conversation, I want to share the comment that he put, saying that my mom is right, that Candace, you and I are doing important work. So James is still with us, still watching with us into the night after midnight in the UK. I remember when we recorded most of the episodes we recorded in the evening based on our schedules. We made sure to do a proper 10 a.m. Eastern recording for James. Um, but I'll say that what struck me about James and our conversation, if you look at the other guests that we've had and the folks that we've talked about, James is the most senior of our guests. I don't want to call him old, but he's the most senior. Um, and it really struck me, uh, for someone to uh, share their story, to disclose it, to talk to family about it, to talk to their friends, to be open about it. Um, I mean, I was nervous about putting my story out there, and how would people respond. um I don't know, I can't even imagine what that's like for someone at a different stage of their life. James is owning it, 77 years old, as he puts in the comments. So thank you, James, for that. It meant a lot to see someone that, to me, is a different type of bravery. Now, maybe there's a different calculation going on, that when you get to that point, you don't care anymore. You don't, doesn't matter. You've kind of been there and done that, and you're just going to speak your truth. But to be so open and so comfortable with it was just striking for me. And one of the things we talked about is where people are on their journey of disclosing their story and sharing their story, and so it it really resonated with me. um I know you have some thoughts about James as well.
Yeah,
right.
so James, I just wanted to tell you since you're listening, I still have your coffee mug. I will be coming to the UK. I don't know when, but when I do land in Europe, because I'm going to manifest that, I will meet you in person and we will have coffee and tea. It'll be on me in your mug. So I owe you your coffee mug and I have it all tucked away in a box. So I that is for you. It's your mug. So I want to manifest that and make sure I get it to you. And that will happen. I know it will. I believe it will. And so for me, when we spoke initially and when we talked on our episode, I think just his recollection, his memories at such a young primal age, like just to know like the feeling of that at such a young and and I have granddaughters that are so young, and when you think back to when you're that little, like what do you really remember, right? And he talked about that and how those memories came to be. So I just that to me was just kind of, having that thought like, wow, those memories so vividly at that young age. He knew what had
Yeah,
happened. He without a doubt knew those horrible things had happened, and it hurt my heart. And at the same time, I have so much respect for James, being as he disclosed his age at 77, and he is showing that no matter how old you are, you can still speak your truth. And that's what I feel is inspirational to any survivor out there. And there are survivors that have told me, Candace, I see you, in this light. I see you telling your truth. I'm just not there yet. And I tell them it's okay. You don't have to, you can live in silence, but you're not alone. We will help. You will find your voice eventually. And that's the beauty of the podcast. That's the beauty of the survivors and thriving, right? Is to being able to just share their stories. And I always say, if you just share it with one person,
yeah,
one person,
yeah,
just you'll feel that lift off of you. You won't feel that you're having to carry it all by yourself.
absolutely, absolutely. Um, we're continuing our review of this season. For folks who might have joined us late, season three of Unspoken Conversations with Candace was dedicated to male survivors of sexual abuse. This is the season finale, so we're doing a bit of a recap of what we've learned and some of the themes that kept coming up. Um, Candace has been hosting this podcast. It has two seasons previously. She's going to return to hosting the podcast after the season is done. I joined her this year as both the first guest of the live stream and the co-host, with production support from Digimentors, the firm that I work with. Um, that allowed us to put it on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our website. It was a whole different experience. This is something that I do on a regular basis, not in terms of the advocacy work, but the production side. Candace has been speaking and active in the advocacy space, but the live stream production was new to her. So we both learned a lot this year, and we certainly grew a lot. So thank you for putting up with me, Candace. In terms of my a little bit of compulsive behavior around perfectionism, etc. But uh,
Neil, you've done
you know,
an amazing job. And I'm just, again, this journey has been just so therapeutic. And I think for both of us, we have been
it
able to
has.
share stories. And we talked about like the emotion behind it. I've had moments where I just was bawling my eyes out,
Yeah,
oh my God, here we go. And just like I said, if we would have played the call of action video, I remember when you first played it and just thinking back, like how time is so precious,
yeah,
and like we're not guaranteed tomorrow. And so you have to live like your best life every day you wake up. And, just be like, I have been living this whole 2023, doing this season, reflecting. I've been saying attitude of gratitude. I am just so grateful. And just, you know, here I go with the waterworks. I just, I can't say it enough, Neil. This journey has been amazing. And I've learned so much about myself and about like healing. And it's like bittersweet because, it's like we're not saying goodbye
no,
forever. We're just
no,
kind of wrapping up this work. And
to know like the planning and the logistics, and it takes time, and it's like we both want it to do so well, but going back to what Kenneth says, we're putting good content out there. And I hope everybody listening, everybody watching, as sensitive and difficult as it is, like you could see me, I'm crying because these are happy tears. It's not like I'm hurting or I'm in pain. It's just like the work that you do when you heal and when you really do the work from the inside out, like it's undeniable what you can achieve. And
Yeah.
to know like I've done this and we've done this and the support that we've received is just, I just can't say thank you enough. And let me stop crying.
um, I'll give
uh,
you something nice to think about as we were finishing our conversation about James, um, our guest from May. You talked about the idea of going out to England to deliver his mug in person, and he said that would be great to meet. And I
yes.
think that that's certainly a part of that. With a lot of this being virtual, there's several guests that you knew beforehand, right? You had a relationship with Scott
Yes.
Kinderman and Callan Hardy. We'll talk about Sean Hittman, Lori, and Kathy later, but there are other folks that we only got to meet online. Kenneth and Michael,
Hmm.
um, Nathan, certainly Jonathan Vaughn. So being able to bridge that kind of online and in-person stuff, I think, is really great. We'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Hmm.
My mom said that she liked um, your approach, the emotional approach, and that you really are a pioneer in putting this out there. So kudos
Oh,
to
thank
you.
you.
Um,
Thank you, Mom. I'll
she
call her Mom.
you're more than welcome to. She's also, she claims to be objective as well. When she says that I also did a good job, I never assumed that she had any objectivity. She's going to fight me on this, and she's going to say something. But she's my mom, and my sister is watching as well.
Hi, Amy.
And I'm going to go back to your comment. I'm going to need my sister to clarify. Amy just wrote, "I second that." So I'm going to assume that she seconds my mom's comment about you.
I'm sure she seconds about you too, Neil. Don't even start.
But Amy is watching from Bellevue, Washington. Amy, thank you for logging in. I know it's somewhat challenging. She has my nephew, who is I can never remember how old he is because he grows so fast. He's either 8 or 9 years old. And this is getting around dinner time. So thank you, Amy, for joining. Um, our next guest that we want to say something about is Michael Kaplinka-Lair. And I I just want to say that in thinking about our guests and thinking about the different folks that we've talked to. Now I'm getting a bunch of comments. Amy is clarifying he's 8. My friend from high school is reminding me that he's 8.
Uh-oh,
Okay, he's
Neil.
8. Not 8 or 9. He's 8 years
8 years
old.
old.
Um,
I'll
I'm
never
the
forget that because my grandson is 8. So we'll never forget that, Neil. We will
not going
know.
to forget that now. The other thing I should mention is that Sanjay and I share the same birthday, so that has always been something I've been very proud of.
Aw.
That we have the same birthday, June 9th. Um, but getting back to Michael, so when I started this effort, I very much felt like a junior partner in the sense of where I was on my journey of sharing my story of being an advocate. Um, and then I looked at people like Scott and Kenneth, who are speakers and involved in advocacy groups. Nathan, I mentioned earlier, who is like a TV star. My eyes were a little big, like looking at him. And Callan wrote a play about his experience and saw it produced. His play was incredible. It was a dialogue between his older and younger selves. And when we met with Michael, um, this was the first time that he was sharing his story.
Mhm.
Um,
And that's what for me, that was the thing that stood out was it was publicly. He's like, "This is the first
yeah,
time." I mean, and so to be I was very honored and humbled to have that moment, for him to publicly be it
yeah.
on for the first time saying what happened to him and sharing that publicly here on Unspoken Conversation with Candace. I was just so honored and humbled and so again, I really encourage everybody to go listen to these episodes. They're on all the different platforms, and watching the video is just so powerful. These stories were nothing but powerful. And like you said, Neil, you were just really intrigued with how similar I think you felt
Well,
with
not
him,
just similar, it put
the
my work in
on the journey.
perspective because
Mhm,
I realized that I wasn't, I mean, if, it's not that it's a race, but if you think of where you are of on the path on the spectrum, um, I felt like you and Nathan, et cetera, were all like further out, and I was at the very beginning. And now I met someone who was actually, you know, I was a year plus in terms of working with you, 6 months into the season, and
mhm,
I met someone who was earlier than I was on that stage, on that scale, and
mhm.
I could see myself in him. I could see like that's where I was. That's where
Right,
I was in his position 6 months before
right.
of sharing it publicly for the first time, and that really um, it gave me a lot of perspective on the work that we're doing. It
Mhm,
gave me a lot of perspective, um, and it it continues to this day. Um, Another person who is I feel further along on that journey, has written a book. He won a Thrive Award at Hope Shining Blue several years ago. Your close friend Sean Hitman.
mhm.
Um, Tell us about Sean a little bit and what he meant to you.
Yeah, so when I met Sean, it was through the Aurora Healing Center, the advocacy services, and we have the Giving Circle, and so that's how I initially met Sean. We both became I became a member, and so that's how I was introduced to Sean. And then, reading the chapter in the collective book that he was a part of, and then, just building a relationship with him, survivor to survivor, and then, he received the Thrive Award at the Hope Shining Blue, and then this past April, I received that same award. And that's a big deal, first of all, and it's a huge
Yeah,
honor, and the way that they celebrated me, and how, it's the fashion runway and it's to celebrate survivors. It's just you see it in a different light, right? And so the day that I was like, I had to write a speech and I had to prepare, and then I had all these like TV interviews on TMJ4 and Fox 6 Milwaukee, and Spectrum was coming to my house, and CBS 58. I mean, there was just so much going on to prepare for this event, to have all the media around the event. And Sean called me that day to check up on me, and I was having a moment. And it was like, again, I believe in the divine design, but his faith and him reaching out, he says, "I just had a feeling that I should check up on you. I just felt strongly." And I believe that that was something bigger than us telling him to call me, and he called me at the right time, and he coached me, and he says, "Just speak from the heart, Candace. Just speak from the heart, and everything will be all right." And those words is what allowed me to just live in that moment, be happy for the moment, and accept the award with smiles, and the way I danced and had a good time on that stage, because I sat in that audience, in the audience, and I've been at the Hope Shining Blue, but to know like I was being celebrated and people were honoring me, as a survivor, as a thriver, and doing the community work that I'm doing, being an advocate, bringing the walks, being part of the healing center. I think I had a lot of tables represented at that event. I had between family, between friends, between my Por La Gente belief. NCAN was there, my committee was there,
yeah,
my season 3 was there, concurrency was there. Like all my good friends and families just rallied around me. I had a lot of people supporting me, and you know. Those were all paid seats, and the amount that we raised, the money that we raised to benefit the survivors, the programs that the healing center has. We raised $228,017. I mean, that was astronomical. That was huge. And so just that event in and of itself, it's every April. And so yeah, I was so honored and humbled, and such a
and
great event. And so Sean, for me, it just touched me that day, and in his episode and his faith. I think for me, his episode, speaking about his faith and his journey, and I didn't say much on that episode. I really listened. Like
Sure.
Sean, just he engaged me in everything that he says, and I felt like at that moment I just was more listening than engaging because I just was taking it all in for myself. Like I was healing in those moments that he was speaking. So
And I'm showing these pictures from a page that I put together on my website. You can find it at neilparekh.org/hope shining blue. I went out there for the event. These are the runway models that Candace was talking about, survivors. And then these are a couple of pictures from the event. You see Candace and I here. This is me and Dawn, who was watching earlier. Um,
Nancy.
Nancy, who also won an award. Candace, when she was receiving her award and speaking. And then this is a great shot because you see Sean on the right, myself, Candace, that's Jeff
Jeff Shugam.
Hugum,
He
and
sponsored the podcast, and
and
Callan.
Callan Hardy as well. Um, and these are all of the survivors afterward, and then the amount they raised. These are highlights from the runway. The different women. These are all survivors. Um, but the pictures that I really wanted to go through is Candace made reference to celebrating at the end of the evening. I'm going to show the slideshow because it was incredible. Candace owned that runway and danced her way um, right through. And you can see the joy. You can see, I mean, there was no stopping her that evening. It was great. It was great to see. I was just thrilled that I could capture it and share it.
Oh, that's my
So,
favorite picture.
right. What, this last
The
one?
one, yeah, that one I love when like my one hand is up. That
That one.
one,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's like
Yeah.
that's my favorite.
It was
Just
just
having the
great to
confetti
see.
and celebration.
Absolutely. And what was nice about that was I had a chance to meet Sean at the event, and because of the way that we were doing the podcast, it was a pre-recorded thing. It was incredible. I met him that evening. The next morning, I did a prep session with him from your place, right, to
Mhm.
make sure that he could connect. The timing worked out. He could get online, and you knew the platform. But then we went out for lunch, and we had lunch with him.
Mhm.
And then we recorded the episode. And so it was really, I mean, talk about being able to develop a relationship with someone, right? As we mentioned, I had a chance to meet Callan at that dinner, um, but Sean is the only other person that I had met in person from our guests, and that really uh, meant a lot. Um, so, Sean, thank you again for all the perspective you've offered over the last year. A couple of more comments as we start bringing this to a close. We have a few more stories to share, but my mom repeated she's glad that we worked together and brought out a lot of untold, unspoken stories. Dawn is saying our Thriver Award group is something so very special, and
It
absolutely
sure
the
is.
Thrive Award from Hope Shining Blue. Uh, my mom liked your dancing, at least from the photograph I'd captured.
Yes.
Um, I want to give a shout out to a colleague of mine at Digimentors, Linda Bernstein, who's watching on Facebook. She's saying thank you for the insights you've shared this year. Um, Linda is part of our leadership team at Digimentors. She manages our social media accounts, and she's been nothing but supportive as we were coming up to this episode. She said, "I mean, I have access to the accounts. I could have posted whatever I wanted from Digimentors, but she actually made it a point. Neil, we should really share this episode. We should say how much we appreciate the work that you've done." And I couldn't have been more appreciative of that. So Linda, thank you for your encouragement and support. Um, we did two episodes for back to back, August and September. You'll notice something different about these two guests. They're not men. They're obviously Lori Poland and Kathy are both involved with NCAN. Candace is on the board as well. Lori is the CEO,
CEO and
um,
co-founder.
co-founder. And those episodes were really interesting because we had a chance to do some of what we're doing today, where we looked back at our earlier episodes. We looked back at some of the highlights. With Lori, we looked at Kenneth, Nathan, and Callan. And Kathy, we looked at James, Michael, and Sean's episode, little clips, and referred to that. It was great to have their support. You organized a walk in Milwaukee in September. Kathy organized one in Columbus at the same
Correct.
weekend as well.
Yes.
What did it mean to you to have these colleagues come on our show and talk about the impact on men on men as survivors?
Well, and I think, like I said, Lori and Kathy both doing the important work, right? Advocacy, Lori's all about prevention and education and research and advocacy and how, so NCAN stands for the National Foundation to End Child Abuse and Neglect. And like I mentioned, Lori is the CEO and co-founder of that organization. Her book, I Live Here, is about a testimony of her story of how she was abducted and left in the Colorado for left. She was 3 years old when that happened. Basically, stranger offered her candy, and what child doesn't love candy? And then she went and was assaulted and left for dead in the Colorado in the woods. And so, thank God she was discovered. Bird watchers heard a whimper and went to the latrine and saw her down there and asked her what she was doing there. And she was like, "Well, I live here," because she had been out there for a few days. And so
Yeah,
she was alive and she survived that, and she was able to she knew who had done that to her. She was able to point that person out. And so, Lori is fantastic. And so for her to have this organization that I am a part of and I'm a board member of, Kathy's a board member, and then to do the walk. So the walk together, like we mentioned, there's one in Milwaukee, one in Columbus, one in Denver. And we just want to expand those walks. And those walks are really about celebrating survivors as well, and to just really bring awareness to our communities so that we can create cultural change. That's the purpose of the walks. And so, I saw Kathy doing the walks through a Facebook group back in 2021 or 2020 or 2021. And I'm like, well, how do you do that? So I brought a walk to the city of Milwaukee, and the first year we raised almost 9,000, close to 10,000. This year we met our goal. We raised over 15,000, and we create grants. There's grants that NCAN now creates from the monies that we raise to come back to the communities that we're serving. And so organizations that participated in our Together Pavilion at the walk can apply for those community grants to help with programs to help our survivors. And for me, it's so important to do that work. In the way of a walk. I mean, and when you think about like Susan G. Komen, you think about,
hmm
American Cancer Society, they all started somewhere with awareness and prevention and education. They all started with their walks. And that's what we're trying to do, is just to raise awareness. And, the first year I had about 100, maybe 75 to 100 people show up. This year, I know we had more than 200 people show up,
yeah,
200 plus. And it was beautiful. Our walk is near Lake Michigan. And I just have to give kudos. John Vaughn, who's one of our other guests that we'll talk about, he actually came to the walk. So it was amazing. And I will be continuing to do this walk every year. So if you're in the city of Milwaukee, please join us. If you're in our surrounding communities, whether you're in Madison, up north, Kenosha, Racine, please join us for the walks. They are great way to kind of get connected and get plugged in, and a way to give back. So
it's great.
thanks
And
for letting me
and
plug that, Scott. I
a-
mean,
abs-
Neil. Thinking about
no
Scott
problem.
because he won the Unspoken
Of
Hero
course,
Award, and then Christina got the Unspoken Hero Award, and then
of
Kat
course.
Claus and Jeff Chugum got the Unspoken Hero Awards for last year. So I gave out 4 awards this year, 2 for last year, and then 2 for this year, which is also something special that I wanted to make sure I mentioned.
And you can learn more about NCAN at endcan.org, endcan.org. It certainly is great to have their support. And as you mentioned, the last guest for the season that we had, Jonathan Vaughn, is also a board member for
Hmm.
NCAN. And as I've been talking about my impressions and kind of what I've taken away from these guests. Uh, I guess I get starstruck, somewhat frequently in this space. Jonathan is a former professional football player. He went to University of Michigan. He played football there and went on to a career in the NFL. Um, and so just right off the bat, there's a certain amount of uh, being starstruck for having someone like that on the show. But the reality is that he was sharing that there was a physician involved with the program at University of Michigan, um, who he found out later after he had gone through the program, um, that this physician had required all of the men who were on the various teams, I think not just football, to come in and get exams done,
Hmm.
prostate exams and testicular exams, uh, when they weren't needed. And it was an excuse, it was an opportunity, it was this monster's chance to um, abuse and assault thousands of men, almost 10,000 men over the course of his career. I mean, Jonathan was just doing the math. Every player went through his office. And he was the physician, not just for the sport, but in general. So if you were sick, you had to see him as well. And, once this started coming out, Jonathan led a protest in front of the university president's house, and drew attention to it, used his, and really brought um, that perspective, the whole thing. And we talked about other universities where this took place at Penn State and elsewhere, where not just football players, but like wrestlers can be abused and assaulted. I think you see USC or UCLA as well. There's another example there, um, and his, again, the bravery to stand up and speak his truth and literally chain himself to a, I think it was a tree in front of the house, in front of the university president's house, because he wasn't going anywhere. I mean, if that's not inspiring, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I think what hit me for Jonathan is the fact that I remember seeing in his video or his pictures he shared, it was like hashtag me too, us too, and then I think he said he too,
He
meaning
too,
he
yeah,
for
yeah.
men. And I think the message was just we need to hold these people accountable. These people that are in positions of power must be held accountable. And that was the big thing, was holding these people accountable and this physician accountable, for what he had done to numerous athletes throughout the course of his tenure as a physician, at that camp, at that school, university, at that campus university.
It was me too, us too, we too, he
He,
too.
he too. That's it.
And just to put in perspective, people may not be familiar with that episode, but there's another episode out of Michigan. I hate saying his name, but Larry Nasser, who was the physician for the U.S. Gymnasts,
Hmm.
and who was prosecuted. And I had the opportunity to interview Judge Rosemary Aquilina, who was the judge who presided over that trial, who gave the women a chance to speak, to say, to give their victim statements. As bad as Larry Nasser was, right? Larry Nasser was an intern for the physician that Jonathan
Hmm.
Vaughn had to deal with. He
Yep.
learned from
From
that
him.
guy. So to me, it just multiplies the impact that guy had, not just directly what he did, but he groomed someone else
Hmm.
to abuse others. And it's
And,
just
and then you
incredible.
just wonder, like, what happened? Did something happen to them? We've talked about that during our season,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, like, did something happen to them where then they do that to others? It's just that's that never-ending question, you
That was
know?
a generational
Mhm.
trauma that I'm trying to remember. who it was we spoke to about that, but that was certainly can you can you forgive someone for doing that? One of the things that I want to highlight from our conversation with Jonathan, this quote really stuck with me. God never calls the equipped; He equips the called.
Mm-hmm.
God never calls the equipped; He equips the called,
Mm-hmm.
which was just profound. Um, and what an incredible group of people that we had the pleasure of speaking with: Scott, Kenneth, Nathan, Kellen, James, Michael, Sean, Lori, Kathy, and Jonathan Vaughn over the course of the year. Um,
And that quote that he equipped all of us. He
yes,
has, honestly, and
yes,
Callan and I just talked about this yesterday because I was telling Callan how, I was thinking, so I bought the domain unspokenministries.org. I know that's going to be something,
hmm,
but it's if I can bring one survivor back to have a relationship with God or in their faith, like that's just something that's been speaking in my heart.
sure,
And he said, Candace, we're all kind of doing our own ministry. If you think about it, we're
sure.
all spreading our truth, spreading the word in the way that speaks truth so that we can help and encourage others to speak theirs. And so he's like, you are, but without the religion aspect, you are ministering, but without the religion aspect, you're speaking your truth to shine a light on the darkness. And I was like, oh my God, that's so true. So again, like always learning from one another. And that is the power of what we've created.
And in speaking about the support that we're getting, my friend Apollo was. I know if I remember correctly, you watched that episode, but he's also wow. That was actually one of the only live episode we did for all the male survivors, right?
Hmm.
Lori and Kathy were live, but this was the only male survivor that we did live. But Apollo saying, "I'm here for you," and I want to say that he has been here for us throughout. Another frequent viewer, sharing it on social media, encouraging other people to watch. Apollo, thank you very much. Apollo is in Philadelphia, um, and what he said is that I've grown from watching your stories. Thank you for your courage, and that's the impact that we've been talking about, and we don't know where that impact is. We don't know who people are going to see it, who need to see it, and hopefully this meant something to Apollo as well, and very polite saying you're welcome, but uh, thank you, Apollo.
Hmm.
um it's you know we want to reiterate that this is the season finale for season 3. um Candace is continuing with the Unspoken Conversations with Candace podcast. I encourage you to find it on her website, CandaceSanchez.com. Um, and you can find the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Um, and our relationship will continue. Our work will continue in different ways. We'll continue to support each other. You talked about the conference that you're planning for 2025. Um, when we talked about Catlin, that you're going to pull folks together. You're also working on a book, right?
I am. So I'm working on my second book. My second book will be called Life After Unspoken: Lessons in Legal, Loss, and Love. And so if you see the play on the L word, um, I did recently take an advocacy training through Belief Survivors Incorporated. During that training, I did more healing. I was well versed on the sexual assault laws pertaining to children. And when I did my own math, just like how John Vaughn did his math and
Yeah.
how many times he was offended and through the course of his life, I became very angry. And I went finally, after all this time, I did report my abuse uh, against my two perpetrators. And I went to the Racine Police Department where the abuse occurred, what city and state it happened in, and I filed the report. Now, honestly, I'm going in there with no expectations because, it's been so long. and they have to do their investigative, but it's really up to the DA when you think about the legal aspect. The DA has the decision to proceed or not proceed. And honestly, Neil, for me, it was just the fact that the importance of reporting, because
Sure.
if another offense were to happen, at least it's documented that I reported. And so, and heaven forbid, I don't want it to happen to someone else, but in case in the event that it does, that it's actually on record. And that is the importance of reporting. That's something that I discovered. And so when we talk about the legal aspect, I am now on this, I feel kind of like the final stage, like the last thing that I need to kind of do the work in is that legal aspect. All part of this too is, Candace Sanchez is looking to kind of renew and restore things that were lost. Even though my name is Candace Sanchez, the Sanchez is part of my abuser's last name, and
Mhm.
what does that mean for me? And I'm really exploring the legality of changing my name to Candace Lopez, which is my biological name. Exploring the pros and cons to that. The pro is that I know my family, I know where I come from. That is so important for me and part of my healing journey. My mom wanted my last name to be Lopez on my birth certificate, so why wouldn't I do what my mom had wanted to do a long time ago and honor that? My grandfather was Sabala. I was my birth name was Sabala until my name got to be changed to Sanchez illegally, from what I understand, by Fred in the way that it was done. So again, when I think about these lessons in the second book, the legal, and then like the loss of love, loss of who you are, loss of identity, loss of just tying that to the name, and so navigating all that. So really, just really learning all of that, and just love. I think about love, I think about self-love, I think about self-care, and really how I've learned to really love myself more and to love who I am and what I've become. I'm perfectly imperfect, I've made mistakes, sometimes I don't always make the best choices even to this day, but I'm doing the best I can with what I'm given, and I'm really trying to put good work out in the community to advocate for others. Not only am I doing this for myself but for others. And it's just important work. And so yeah, that's my second book. I'm really excited for that. And like I mentioned earlier, the conference,
Mhm.
Callan and I talked about the conference. It's going to be the Path to Healing Survivor Retreat Conference, but we're going to be inviting professionals, allies, counselors, therapists to the conference, and then survivors. And I really hope that everybody that has been on my podcast to come out to this conference. Like, we need you to show up. We need to all get together in person. And this conference is going to be a whole weekend. We're going to do Friday, we're going to do Saturday and Sunday. Me and Callan, we have been brainstorming all day yesterday, or for most of the afternoon, and I cannot wait. We're going to plan all of 2024, and the goal is to have the event June of 2025. And so I'm so excited and honored that Callan has handed over the torch, and he will be consulting me throughout the journey. He's going to be part of it, and we're going to do great work. So I can't wait. I
We
can't
have
wait.
some comments coming in. Family, right?
Yep. Family, my brother-in-law Albert. Hi sis. I see that. Sending our love and prayers. Oh, thank you,
Um,
Albert. I love you.
my
Appreciate
mom
you.
is saying congratulations on the process of the second book, which is a big deal.
It's a
Certainly
big
a big
deal.
deal. Apollo is encouraging you, change the name. If it brings less anxiety, then do you be a Lopez.
I would have been
And
Candace Lopez, like Jennifer Lopez. That's Candace Lopez.
as far as my mom is concerned, it's already
Oh,
happened.
mom. Oh,
Candace
yes.
Lopez, you're doing great. I'm proud of
Oh,
you. Um, and Dawn has already said that she's in for the conference as well.
awesome. Yes. And so really with the conference, I just want to put a plug for people listening. Funding is a big thing. We know things get
Sure,
cut in all of our
sure.
budgets and whatnot. So we're really going to be looking for sponsorships. So, looking for a committee to help plan. I'm really going to lean in on the organizations that I'm a part of, tapping into their survivor networks, getting the word out. I'm really excited. I want to do this and do this right. I want to make sure that we offer healing for survivors. Friday night, my vision is to come in and do all types of healing, whether it's Reiki, massages, soundbar therapies, yoga. You're going to get all rejuvenated the Friday night before we go and do the work on Saturday, and have keynotes and have a closing keynote and have panel discussions and have, celebration of stories stories and just, what's everybody doing to help support it. And, we thought we would have it in June of 2025 because we know April is such a big month for sexual assault
Mhm,
awareness,
mhm,
child abuse prevention, where all those organizations can advertise and market for our event in June. So me and Callan really kind of thought out everything. And again, we invite professionals and clinicians, providers, therapists to come out and hopefully get some credits, because we believe we'll have some great credits for people to learn and get knowledge from the conference. And then, wish everybody well on Sunday. Sunday, we're thinking of, there's some survivors that don't make it, some
sure,
survivors that commit suicide. Let's just
sure.
be real. And, or drugs, alcohol take them, or they die from a deadly disease because they didn't heal, right? So we want to honor those individuals. So we're thinking of having, on Sunday, whether it's a gathering, whether it's, I don't, more spiritual gathering, just kind of to have a moment of silence for those
Mhm,
individuals and just to
mhm.
honor them and the voices that are no longer here, but that we will honor them in that way. So I'm really excited,
And
Neil. I can't wait.
as you can see, James would love to get to the conference. He'd have to figure out how to get there from the
Yes,
UK, which is
yes,
obviously a long way.
yes.
Um, so that's what, in terms of kind of our upcoming plans and what we're doing. On my side, I I want to take a step back, and we're gonna bring this to a close. Appreciate everyone sticking with us and watching. Um, when I started this process with you, Candace, um, I was scared like you wouldn't believe. This idea of sharing my story, of putting it out there. Um, I it was overwhelming. I knew that I want to do it in a certain way, to share my story, to talk to people about it, and so I'm going to go back to the beginning, to a certain extent. um, the way that I know how, the way I know to do this. um, I wrote a blog post and put it all over my social media. um, it was um, piece, a journey of discovery and healing. I was only 7 years old when he knocked on my door, and I put out my truth, and I included in that this article, that was in the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. I'm scrolling through my website. This is the video of the call to action that Candace and I talked about earlier from the conference. But this article, I was interviewed after that. Uh, Sorry about the pop-ups. I shouldn't have clicked on the actual piece. Um, the lead for the story just got me. It's make it bigger so folks can see. Um, I was Neil Park was 7. He was home alone. His older neighbor came over and he suggested they work on a Cub Scout project in the basement. To see that in print was just uh, mind blowing. Um, but I did that, and then after that, the response was so great to that website, to that blog post, that I actually did another piece, effectively saying thank you. I wanted to bring that up real quick, um, to show people. Um, it was, as I'm clicking around, um, my 7-year-old self and 49-year-old self both say thank you. The response I got was so tremendous, so supportive. The comments, from work colleagues to United Way colleagues to high school friends to college friends, um, this meant so much to me. And I gathered these comments together, and you can see this comment from Dawn is the very first one. This is very intentional. I mean, I laid this out. I don't do anything, by mistake. Um, but this was Dawn's response, um, and and I have a number of other responses as well. Um, One of the themes that kept coming up for us during the year was the impact on mental health.
Hmm.
And I have said to people, and I've said this for years, that I find it harder to talk about um, mental health than being abused. Um, I am uh, more reluctant to share with people that I suffer from anxiety, that I suffer from depression occasionally, that I see a therapist. These are not words that I say easily or talk to people about. Um, and it was this show, this season, all the people that we spoke with that gave me the courage and um, the sense that I can talk about these things. And so
Mhm.
what I'm going to be doing for 2024, and I'm thrilled that Dawn is going to be joining me. We are going to launch a series of conversations, series of live streams around mental health. Um, we're going to talk about our own experiences with it, our own challenges and struggles. Um, but we also are going to bring in uh, friends of ours and colleagues who are willing to share their stories. I've already spoken to half dozen people who are willing to talk about their own experience with anxiety and depression. I have several therapists that are going to come on the show as well. They're going to talk about their populations they've served. Dawn has reached out to people. Um, my hope is that we will destigmatize mental health, that I will feel the way I feel about talking about sexual abuse now after a year of working with you. I'm hoping that I'll feel the same way both after the launch and also after the year. Um, and that Kenneth's words still ring true, that this will, people will find this content when they need it, that
Mhm.
it'll help them, that they'll hear other people talking about their challenges. Um, and this is like I said, scarier to me than talking about being abused. um i I've been dealing with this since high school. I found things that I'd written when I was actually at my mom's house, these little like journal entries and stuff, and I could see that I was dealing with depression. I don't know if I knew it at the time. I certainly knew it when I was in college, and later when I was in Seattle. I mean, I know there have been long stretches where uh, it's been overwhelming. But I would never say that to anyone. I'd never share it with anyone that I was depressed, or even not a full blown depression, but kind of being stuck, having the anxiety of not being able to push through. Um, and so we're going to be talking about this over the next year, and a lot of this is coming from the work that we've done together, Candace. And
Mhm.
I'm thrilled to say that on the first episode, Don and I will share our stories, but Candace has agreed to be our first guest, to provide that bridge and to share her challenges as well. So we'll share more details about that. We'll, certainly we're planning on this being second and fourth Thursdays in the evenings. But Don and I are planning on writing a joint blog post to launch it, and we will certainly share it across our socials. And that show will also be live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and my website. And we just hope you have a chance to tune in and listen. Um, Kate is saying that it is real, it is scary, and she's so grateful for Don and I for taking this on. Thank you, Kate. That means a lot, and we'll certainly be hoping for your support over the course of the year. Apollo says challenges and celebrations. Absolutely, that's a great way of putting it. And Dawn says she's very excited to partner with me on this. And I want to put that picture back up because if folks don't know Dawn, you will be getting to know our good friend Dawn over the course of the next year. And Dawn, I just want to say again, um, you are really the inspiration for all of this work. When I first met you at United Way at a United Way conference, and you mentioned that you were a survivor, I made it a point to introduce myself, but kind of put the abuse history information in my back pocket. I kind of like, okay, I'm going to get to that later, but I wanted to make sure that I got to know you and learning about the work that you've done with Denim Day in Milwaukee, and then my ability to share that within the United Way network over several years without sharing my own story, just doing it because I felt it was important to do. Bringing you on as a guest on the New York Times read along to talk about Denim Day twice, um, and then this podcast, this show with Candace, and now the mental health show that we're going to launch. I owe you so much, Dawn. Thank you, thank you.
Divine design. That's all I keep saying in my head. Divine design, just how we're all connected and how
Yeah,
the power of that connection. People are meant to come in your life for a reason or a season. And I think that the work that we've done, unspoken conversation with Candace and dedicating the season and Neil then planting the seed for you, right? I mean, mental health is very important, and I think people don't talk about it enough. I think for me, COVID is what really brought out my anxiety, my depression, when I really sat still with myself. And when I was writing the book during that COVID time, I mean, I don't know how many times I threw my laptop down, how many times I cried, how many times I stayed in my basement. I was in the dark. I didn't want to get off the couch. I remember my mom having to check on me. Did you even eat today? Like, and I would do my day job, but people didn't know how dark it had gotten for me. I think my family kind of knew, and I was just going through a lot. And I wasn't alone. Like I still had my village, but Candace learns how to put on a facade. I learned that as a child. I learned that to survive, right? I put on a facade where I'm all happy and go lucky, but deep down I am hurting and I am in pain and I want that pain to stop. And I just think that people just need to be more vocal about it and to know like it's okay.
yeah,
It's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way.
yeah,
And I think that there's so much power that when you give power to that, right? And you're able to let other people know like, "Hey, I feel that. I know what that's like." You're going to give the voice to so many and yes, let's break the stigma. Just like, unspoken, it's taboo. You shouldn't talk about it. You can't talk about it. People don't
exactly.
want to talk about it or people want to shut you up. People want to make you be quiet. That's what they want. That's what they want us to do, and I'm not doing that anymore. I choose this is now what I need to do. I have a personal responsibility not only for myself but for everybody else. And that's why I'm so grateful and honored. And again, attitude of gratitude. And I just want to thank everybody for tuning in, for supporting Unspoken Conversation with Candace, especially the season 3. And
Yeah.
I will continue. Season 4 is all teed up and queued up. I got more guests coming in January, February, March, and then I'm going to wrap up season 4. And season 4 is all going to be about different healing journeys, different things that you can do to heal, and just sharing more stories, more powerful stories of survivors, getting rid of people, toxic people in your life. Sometimes it's family. I mean, just the adversity and then overcoming and transforming. I can't wait to share the rest of the season 4. And again, just thank you, Neil, for all the work that
I want
Digimentors did.
I
Thank you
want to
so
make sure
much.
to get my mom's comment in, just saying that Candace provided a lot of motivation and inspiration. She can see the changes, and and some of this is an outgrowth. My mom herself has a master's of social work from Columbia University, so there is that kind of family kind of heritage as well in terms of that wanting to do good. James says it's been good watching and listening. I've got to go now. It's late for
It's
James.
late.
Remember, he's in the
Good night,
UK.
James.
I'll keep in touch. Wish you all the best and thank you. And
Thank you.
we've been going as well. It's a little longer than our usual shows. We knew that we'd have a hard time bringing this to a close, but um, Apollo says, "Be well in all ways." Thank you, Apollo. And Candace, I think the most important thing is for folks to know that the work will continue, with some of our work supporting each other, some of it's going in different directions. Um, but just I'm so thankful to have been on this journey with you, and to have shared this time and space over the last year. It really has meant a lot, and I'm just grateful,
I'm grateful as
absolutely
well.
grateful.
Me as well, Neil. And again, I just want to wish everybody happy holidays. And again, just thank you, Neil, for this amazing opportunity to do the video production. Thank you to Digimentors. Thank you to Jeff Chugum. Thank you to Jesse Day. So thanks to
Yeah,
everyone that watched, that tuned in, that listened, that supported, that shared, that commented. Just we really appreciate it. So please continue to join us in this effort. Continue to follow Neil and the work that he's going to be doing with Dawn next year. It is needed. And I will continue with Unspoken Conversation with Candace. Season 4 will be launching in January of 2024. Stay tuned for the conference. Stay tuned for my second book. And I just want to say thanks to everybody tuning in and listening. And happy holidays. Enjoy.
thank,
Happy New Year.
thank you.
Thanks,
Happy
everyone.
holidays. Bye bye.
Bye, everyone. Good night.